You're listening to The Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I'm known for my relentless pursuit of all things customer. Across my career, and also in my 6 startups, I've had to learn how to make decisions in business that customers really respond to. Let's spend some time together and help your business soar, grow, and accelerate. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of The Science of CX. I'm your host, Steve Pappas, and as always, we're bringing you some incredible content today. You know, we're trying to really look at this entire season, all of these episodes that we're getting through between now and September. We are really trying to deliver a mini MBA course in customer experience. And to accomplish that, we're trying to bring content from every corner of customer experience. And today we have a guest on. And today we have Jill Raff on. And we're going to be talking about all kinds of things, but we'll get into it after I tell you their bio. So Jill, welcome to today's show.
Thank you. I'm so excited. I really enjoyed our pre-call, and I can't wait to speak again today. Thank you.
Same here. Same here. I was really looking forward to this episode. So let me tell everyone a little bit about you, just so that they understand who Jill Raff really is. So, with over 30 years of customer experience, Jill Raff grew up working with her parents, who were owner-operators of McDonald's store number 150. So this really goes back, and your experience is going to come from some of the beginnings of one of the biggest food empires in the world. She truly learned how to apply Ray Kroc's customer service philosophy that permeates their over 37,800 stores. Jill followed her dream to be a fashion designer, taking her to work in New York, Italy, and Hong Kong. Jill speaks fluently in 5 languages. She was trained as a chef at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, France, became a top food stylist, and within the food industry, worked with brands like Harrods, Michelin, Starred Restaurant, Guido, Godiva, Food and Wine Magazine, the Oprah Magazine, Good Morning America, and the Today Show. In addition to that, Jill closed over $25 million in real estate sales as she's licensed in New York and Texas. Jill uses her entire background now as a high-level consultant for companies who want to create a 5-star customer experience. Jill, I'm tired just reading your bio. I'm going to take a break after that one. No. So why don't we just jump right in, because there's so much in your background that leads you to provide a real well-rounded customer experience advisory approach. But let's start from the beginning, right? I noticed in the McDonald's part. So let's start at where did it all begin, and how did you guys and your family get into McDonald's? And, tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. Well, my parents were born and raised in Chicago, and my dad was working in insurance at the time, and some of his buddies had opened a McDonald's. And so they approached him about joining them to open another store. But instead, he talked to my mom's dad, and they decided to open the first store together. And so they went through the process, and McDonald's gave them Ocala, Florida as the location of their first store. And they picked up and moved. My mom was pregnant with my middle sister, and she and I were both born in Ocala because of the move to McDonald's. But that's really how it started. It was a big risk. They had no idea what it would be. Now it's people like, oh, McDonald's a known quantity. No, they had no idea. It was a pure, let's just try this and hope that it works.
It's interesting because it sounds like you probably grew up in the McDonald's business. So what are the things that you noticed? What are the things that you saw back then, in the early days of McDonald's?
I think Interestingly, I did some interviews recently of both crew people to managers, or even people who went on to be division heads that worked for my father. And I think one of the things that he talked about, one of the people really said it best, was that McDonald's, he learned the values of taking care of people, of putting customers first. And this was something that my dad really embodied, and he ran his stores that way. And so that was something that I was exposed to very early on. I mean, my very first job when I was the youngest of three was answering the phone. I was 7 years old, and my sisters were already working on the shakes, and I couldn't go in the front of store. And so, I was like, good morning, McDonald's is your kind of place. May I help you, please? I will never forget those words. And my sweet dad, he would always call to make sure I earned, my salary, that I picked. I did my job and checked the quality. But it was, even that was a first impression with your customer. And people mention that I still think of that he taught them. And we're talking multiple decades at this point, because my dad unfortunately passed very early, 25, almost 26 years ago. And they still remember that he would say, never cross the lot without picking up a piece of trash. If you see a customer there, hold the door open for them. And it was always customer first. And so I really did grow up with this. And so I feel like it truly is a part of my DNA.
That's interesting. You said something when you picked up the phone. Maybe can we concentrate on that phrase, that tagline? McDonald's is your kind of place. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of material in there that we could break apart.
I love that you picked up on that. I actually have written, that's a part of one of my blog posts and my talk, because I didn't realize it, of course, at the time, but now with the insight, right, the looking back 2020, I realized that phrase held so much. McDonald's is your kind of place. It was the motto at the time. Like now it's, McDonald's, loving it, I'm loving it. So at the time it was McDonald's is your kind of place. So it was reinforcing the company brand right off the bat, letting you know about the brand's values. And then the next part was, McDonald's is your kind of place. May I help you? So you're saying you're there to serve them. And of course, you have to always say please and thank you. And so it was teaching me to be courteous, to be kind, to ask them, how can I serve you, while reinforcing the company brand? It's brilliant when I think back to it.
And I think I picked up on a couple more things. I picked up on the smile in your voice. And I also picked up that it's almost a peer affirmation. It's we're like you, right?
Yes.
We're all in this together, which is very important these days too. So thanks for that. So what else did you learn, from this, this early business, from your parents? What other things did you take with you through your career?
I think working together, putting people first and starting with the employees. One thing that I saw with another story, I'll just try to be quick, but it's something that was reinforced by the interviews that I did with these people who worked with my father, was that he always looked at them in the same way. Like he knew everyone's name. He knew their family's name. And what was going on in their family. He would ask about their family by name. And if there was a problem going on, he'd come in the store. He didn't stand in the back and tell people what to do. He would roll up his sleeves and he would get in there, and he would always work side by side. And that was something that one of the managers pointed out to me, was that your dad, whenever he came in, he would always work next to us. And he loved the fry station, but he was always there to support us with whatever we did. And that was something that I think I take away that's really important, that the owners and the management don't sit and look down and tell people what to do, but they work side by side. And you let your people know that they are just as important to the success of your company. They are, in fact, the success of your company. And when you take care of them, then they're going to naturally take care of your customers. And that was something that I learned. But interestingly, that was something that these managers pointed out specifically, that they took away from my dad's experience and my dad's modeling that for them.
I know we're talking about McDonald's here. We're talking about restaurant and food service, but I think the takeaway here for all of our listeners is this is not limited to restaurants. This is across the business realm, and it's really important because my uncle had been in food services, and I'm sure lots of our listeners have probably worked food service or fast food, going through school, through college, et cetera. And he had told me that people that work fast food or food service, they develop an incredible grasp of customer service and customer experience because the feedback is more immediate. You know if they like it or not. You know if they're happy or not. You know if they send something back they didn't like it. So the feedback is more immediate than in almost any other industry. So you do get the voice of the customer back sometimes pretty hard, but you get it back quickly. So maybe what we could do is we can, kind of talk about across the industries. You've worked in a lot of industries, and what I'd like to ask now is, how does all of that experience from fashion designing to being a chef in Paris, food stylist, and real estate? I mean, how does all of that it molds a different type of customer experience expert? And we always like to talk here on the show about how did you get here, right? And because we all come from different avenues and different paths, but you've got such a diverse background that I'm sure you've somehow synthesized along the way to be the advisor and the guide that you are today. So maybe give us a little background as to what across these industries really contributes to how you're able to help businesses today.
Thank you so much for asking that, Steve, because it's interesting. At face value, people are like, well, what does fashion have to do with real estate or food? Like, they don't get it. And it really is the same, like you mentioned before, even though we're talking about restaurants, because that's my background, that's what I come from. At the end of the day, the common, what I call this golden thread in this beautiful fabric, that's my fashion side of customer experience, is in the details. It's putting people first. And so I took all of these principles that were modeled for me and that I truly lived within my entire life, and use them across the board. So, for example, my first career was fashion. I always loved fashion and wanted to be a fashion designer. And so I was a knitwear specialist. And as a designer, I wasn't just that I sat down and designed beautiful clothing. I had to start with the customer's interest in mind first. And that is the same concept that applies across real estate, across food styling, across any business, retail, coaching, because you have to start with what the customer's interest is first and reverse engineer. So I had to think about who was our avatar, our ideal client. What was, based on their demographics and everything else, what's their price point? So I had to, with knitwear, I started with buying my yarns, and then I would make my fabric and then go into the design. And I'd have to think about production cost. So I had to buy consciously about price so that my end product would actually fit for what my client was, my customer at the time was able to purchase. And I had to think about where was I going to do production, because I handled production. So I would choose factories, whether it was in Hong Kong or San Francisco or Italy, based on the yarn had carried certain duty, depending upon the makeup of the yarn, that, whether it was cotton or man-made fiber, so forth and so on. So I was always had to think about what went into each element and what was going to serve them both in terms of design and their price point, et cetera. Same thing with, with my food styling. I had to think about where was it going to be shown. So was it a cookbook? Was it a magazine? Was it the TV show? Whatever the end product was, who was it that was consuming that information? And was the style appropriate for them? Was it, the recipe, if I had to change the recipe around or tweak it, how did I do so it would serve that end customer? In real estate, my gosh, nothing more important in real estate than how you take care of your customers, putting their interests first. You want, from the buy side, I was always so excited to work on the negotiations and make sure I got them the best deal. And the same for the seller side. In New York, I was mostly a listing agent, so I represented the sellers. And it was really exciting to be able to show off their property and to know that I was going to be able to get them the best price for their investment. And so I was always thinking of, how can I best serve them? And just one quick, short little statement that in my fashion days, the best compliment that I ever got was from a yarn supplier who I had to negotiate over price because I was thinking about my end price. And he's like, my gosh, Jill, you would think this is your business, the way you're negotiating me over a kilo of yarn. And that's the way I work. That's who I am. That's something that I did learn from my dad early on, is the integrity and the work ethic. And no matter what I do and who I'm working for, whether it's that seller or the art director, no matter what it is, or a client now, I want to make sure that whatever I get for you would be the same that I would do for me. I work as hard for you, and I really approach it like it's my own business project or deal or whatever it is.
Great, great. Well, I've got more questions for you, but I've got to pay some bills, so we've got to take a quick break, and we will be back right after this.
Panviva has 25 years of empowering customer service, and we have deep expertise in how people actually use information from our roots in learning and performance. We offer accurate, consistent information on demand to every channel, most relevant knowledge at your people's exact moment of need, integrated, streamlined internal processes, systems that deliver memorable and remarkable customer experiences that boost customer attention and loyalty every time, and knowledge that extends across your entire digital landscape. To learn more, visit Panviva at www.panviva.com.
And we're back with Jill Raff. Here we're talking about everything from restaurants to fashion design, and I've got more questions for you. Let's go back to the restaurants, Jill, if you will. So these days, and maybe we'll bring it back to the current atmosphere a little bit. These days, I'm noticing restaurants, and we've talked about it on other episodes, that are trying to build experiences, consciously or unconsciously, during COVID that are somewhat memorable or can be memorable. But I don't know about you, but we've had a lot of delivery. We've had a lot of third-party delivery companies that we've engaged for everything from our food shopping to our prepared food needs. And, quite frankly, things have fallen down on the job a little bit, when it comes to some of the delivery. Can we talk a little bit about, what happens to the brand when the delivery goes awry?
Yeah, that is definitely a big problem. The restaurants, I think those who were already engaged with third-party delivery before were definitely, I know that they were dealing with that, is how do they maintain that when that product is delivered to someone's door, that if something's gone bad because the delivery person messed it up or it got sloppy or it was cold instead of hot, there's a million things that could happen between when it leaves the restaurant to when it arrives at your door. The concern is, people, do they associate it with us instead of the delivery company? And I think they do, right? Because we order from the restaurant. So when we get the food, we think that this is from the restaurant. We kind of somehow go vacant on that middle third party experience affecting the whole thing. And so interestingly, now during this pandemic that we're in, a lot of restaurants, one, for price, because the prices the third-party businesses take a huge chunk out of the restaurant's bill. And so right now they need every penny they can get to stay alive. And I think it's thrown a lot of people into the business of delivery, which never were. And I know that was something they were kind of doing, kicking and screaming, not wanting to go there, knowing that this was the future and they had to. But suddenly the future, in a day, in a screeching halt, became the present. And so Now there's a lot of discussion going on and already a lot of invention. Crisis creates invention, without a doubt. Businesses are creating their own delivery apps, their own delivery services. They're working together to figure out, perhaps even with several businesses together. And so people are just being really creative and thinking outside the box because they realize we want the customer experience to be fluid and we want it to be good from when it leaves us to when it arrives at your door. And we want you to experience that and know that that's from us and that it didn't get messed up somewhere in between, but you think it was us and it really had nothing to do with us.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of things to think about there from a restaurant that's really concerned with their brand. I mean, we've just ordered so much in the last few months, and we even have a list of things you don't order for delivery.
Yeah.
Like fried foods, especially in those styrofoam containers, and they've been steaming on their way.
Yeah.
I don't mean to get gross.
Yeah. But, that's an interesting point because that is something that the restaurant needs to be responsible for. They need to think through their menu. And now, anyway, during this time, people have condensed menus, but they should have a separate menu, which many do have, a separate menu for takeout, knowing that certain foods don't travel well. And if you want that customer to say, oh my gosh, that restaurant was amazing, that dish was amazing, you need to make sure that you can sell a product that will be received where it still tastes great. You raise a great point.
Yeah, great question there. So, why don't we talk about what can restaurants do? And again, I don't want people to feel like this episode is just about restaurants because all of these tips and tricks and things that Jill is talking about really apply to any business. You have to think through all of these aspects. You have to think through the customer journey. I don't know how many times we've said it on this show that you really have to think about the end-to-end journey of the customer, all the way through to when they're putting something on Yelp or online.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for bringing that up again, Steve, because one of the things that I've been doing is, depending upon what the client is and what the business is I go through and I make a list of every touch point from that first phone call because we are using the phone much more now than we did before because of this new type of pickup business and a lot of restaurants or any business, I say restaurants by default, but really it truly is any business. And the process that I've created to guide and consult through customer experience really is across the board. It applies to anyone. It's just because of my background, I'm focusing a little bit on the restaurants and hospitality, but and so I make a list of the touch points starting from the very first connection, whether it's the phone call or whether it's on your website. And then you go through step by step and you say, how do we make this touchless? But how do we also make sure that each of those steps are genuine, are warm? Do we have a way to connect in a way that really amps up the experience? And if it's not direct and personal, looking them eye to eye, how do you use your language? How do you use your body language with a lot of the Zoom stuff? What are all the touch points and going through? And yes, with ratings and reviews, I have a whole other a chapter actually in a course that I offer, but it talks about the power of ratings and reviews and how you can both help your people give you those great ratings and reviews and how to then use them as well within your menu to actually or products that you're selling that are a higher profit margin in your stores or your coaching packages. No matter what it is, there are ways to position that and get reviews to actually support that, and so that you sell more of those. So these strategies that I have 100% apply across the board. And when I work with someone, I look at what's going on in their business, and it doesn't have to be food related because I have had so much experience in other industries. That is what I feel is a value add, that is a unique value proposition that I bring, that I'm able to really see a business problem from multiple perspectives, multiple industries, and really a multidimensional approach.
So maybe we could give a couple of tips and tricks here for restaurants and other businesses. What kind of a takeaway can can owners or heads of organizations take away and start to think about whether they're doing it right, start to think about how they could do it better, how to work with their team? What are some things that they might be able to start thinking about now? And then we could talk about, if they want more information, you've got courses and books and things. We could talk about those too.
Sure. So 2 quick tips. And they're going to be broad, 50,000 foot views. But one is something I call, it's known as the daily huddle. It wasn't my proprietary calling it daily huddle. And it could be daily, it could be weekly. And for example, again, one of the managers said that my dad used to do a weekly meeting with them. And that was something they still remember to this day. So in that huddle, whether it's daily or weekly, the key thing is that you're connecting with your people. And in those, you can set it up however you want, but you keep them short. If it's daily, 10, 15 minutes max. You keep it focused, you keep it positive. You use it to do multiple things. One, you want to let people know, of course, in general, what's going on and what's kind of a priority for you. What happened last week, what happened yesterday, and what we want to make better going forward. Secondly, a suggestion that I offer is looking at your core values, assuming that you have actually done that. And that's a whole other discussion, but looking at your core values and what that means, highlight one of the principles of your core values and let that be a topic that you're going to live into for that day. So if it's a daily huddle, let's go that route. That day, you're going to live into that value. And then the next day, you go back and you revisit, did we do what we wanted according to that value? Who has some great examples? Maybe give awards to your people who showed that value the best for that day, and recognize them. People want to be recognized, acknowledge them, give them positive feedback. If maybe something went awry, which it will, we're all human, don't chastise them and criticize, always stay positive and say, you know what, we recognize that this happened. Here's a better way. Maybe think of next time trying this out. Now, again, if you had done the training and the education, which is part of my process that I mentioned in the beginning, they will already have that knowledge of how you want them to interact with your people, how you want them to express the language that you want them to use that is both customer experience related, but also for your brand. Like we talked about with the phone call, right? The McDonald's. So let people know, how is it that you want them to speak, to recognize that this is your brand, but also how we treat people, which again reinforces that value. So that's just a snippet from the huddle idea. And the last one was something that I just hinted on before, but it's based off of a Spiegel research statistic, which is insane to me, of using the power of ratings and reviews and how you can, they show that if a restaurant or a business, it's not actually a restaurant, but if a business uses the ratings and reviews, that they find that people come in and will buy that product that's been given great reviews. It increases the revenue by 380%. 380, I was blown away on the items that had been reviewed. So my idea from taking that one statistic was how to apply it. Take that product, ask when you see that people are ordering it, and at what point it'll become this beautiful cycle that will be self-fulfilling. But if it's a product that you want someone to buy, whether, again, it's a particular coaching offer or a product in your store, ask people, when you see that people have bought it, make sure that you ask them for a review. And most times, 7 out of 10 times, people will give you that review if you ask. You just have to ask. You treat people nice, law of reciprocity, they're going to want to do right by you. So you ask them for a review on that product that you know has a high profit margin. They put it out there. Then you can then take that, all these great reviews now become great testimonials for you. So you take these as kind of a case study and testimonial, you bring that back into your offering point, wherever that is, whether it's a menu or maybe, on a shelf or in your coaching program where your services are, you highlight that. You put a star by it and you say, show 5-star reviews or 4.5, whatever high review as noted by, and then you highlight this. And so when people, it's a fact, people buy more of what people have given high reviews to. So now you're going to sell more of that. So it becomes this great cycle that you get more reviews and the reviews provide more sales. And because it's a higher ticket item, higher profit margin item, you're actually going to make more sales at the end. It's this beautiful cycle that happens.
What great advice. I mean, that is wonderful advice. So Jill, why don't we see, how can people get in touch with you? How can people find out more about your book and course coming up? I know that that will be at Jill Raff Group, JILLRAFF Group.thinkific, THINKIFIC.com. But tell a little more about what your course is. And, I could say it, but I think it'd be better coming from you.
Sure. So this is a course that I kind of had in the works, but especially with what's going on, I really I went back and revisited it and I added to it so that we are addressing the issues that we have now. And I think the biggest problem in business across the board is that people are afraid of getting sick. No one wants to get this coronavirus going around. And so the CDC has put out, of course, the minimum requirements and things that we should be doing. But I think as customers, so I did a survey and people want to know that, of course, safety is most important, but training, that your people have been trained. And that is where I come in. And that's why I created this course, because one of the things that I'm getting the most feedback from is the very first chapter, the first module that I created called the Beyond the CDC. So we talk about what can you do beyond the CDC to create confidence? So the name of the course is Confident Customers Through Customer Experience. And this is what we need to address is how do we rebuild this trust right now to encourage people to do more business with us. And so that's the first chapter that's specifically around that. But the other modules, actually, they will all touch on how to address what's going on now. But as we talked about before, they really are customer experience strategies and principles. And each one, so we have a pre-recorded video in each one. We have at least one action guide. And that's where the magic happens, because you take the information that's been given to you in the video, you think about your business, what's going on, you really work honestly, no ego, and deal with what's going on in your business. And that is going to take you to a new level in your business. There are other additional resources. And the great thing, I'm a people person. That's what customer experience is about. So of course, anything that I do is a hybrid. So we are doing one-on-one calls and group calls. So we'll do group calls. You can learn from other people, ask me questions, always have access to me, but we'll also have that one-on-one exchange because everyone's business is different. And so we'll look specifically at what you're doing. So I'm really excited about it. We're going to be starting out with a pilot for the first 12 qualified businesses. It could be any business. And that's going to be out when you hear this. You'll get the code for that. And then, it's going to be opened up for everybody, and just really excited because more than anything, Steve, right now, especially, I just want to help people. I want to see businesses rebound and make a difference. And I know that this course can help them do that. And I know that brainstorming is something that I thrive on. And it rise to another level when we work together and brainstorm together. And this course will give you the opportunity to do that, because going it alone is exhausting and usually much less fruitful and will take much longer.
Great. Well, I hope people will just take a listen here and understand that to get Jill's master guidance and to get the one-on-one, I would want to be one of the first 12 in. So I would encourage you to look Jill up and be able to get her to help guide you and build a better business. So, and Jill reminded me also before we end to make sure that we thank all of the restaurant workers, the restaurant owners, and the suppliers that have been feeding us so well in the last 4 months of all of this crisis and this pandemic that we do owe a debt of gratitude to all of the folks that have been on the front line, not only the frontline workers, but also the restaurant workers and the people in these essential industries. Jill, I want to really thank you for being with us today, because I was looking so forward to this conversation, and I've learned a lot, and I think our listeners have learned a lot. So really thank you again for being on today.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure. I could talk about this with you, Steve, forever. So thank you. And I'm encouraged and excited and look forward to helping your listeners as well. Please reach out.
Sounds good. Thank you, everyone. Well, you've been listening to another episode of The Science of CX. I'm Steve Pappas, your host. Until the next time, please take care. You've been listening to The Science of CX. My name is Steve Pappas. I really hope you've enjoyed this episode. And if you have, the highest compliment that you can give us is to subscribe, rate, and review The Science of CX. Thanks, and we'll see you in the next episode.